Our next guest is the author of a book she didn't plan on writing. It started with a call from one mom who was frustrated the media wasn't talking about the transgender fad affecting young girls. Abigail Shrier listened and made the courageous decision to tackle the issue herself. The result is a powerful book called Irreversible Damage: The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. A Wall Street Journal contributor, Abigail has been determined to pull back the curtain on this radical agenda. And Abigail, on behalf of parents, thank you and welcome to the Values Voter Summit.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for your invitation to be on.
Abigail, I just want to start with this. Give us the story behind the book.
Sure. I'm a journalist and a lawyer by training. So I had written a piece for the Wall Street Journal about transgender pronoun laws. These are laws that we have in New York and California that assign criminal and civil penalties for failing to use someone's preferred gender. And of course, I pointed out in the piece that this is straightforwardly unconstitutional. In America, the government can't make you say anything at all, not even for the sake of politeness. So that's what I wrote. And a reader wrote to me and she was very upset. She said that her daughter had gone off to college, her daughter who had had mental health struggles, anxiety, depression, and some other things. But had always been a girly girl, dated boys and whatnot, and decided at 18 with a group of girlfriends that she was trans. And started a course of testosterone, and which is easily obtainable. And she was very alarmed. Apparently, parents all across the country were going through this, and no one was talking about it. And it's a real phenomenon. And when I could not get a real investigative reporter to take it up, no one would. I finally said to the woman, "All right, let me look into this."
Now, in the process of writing this book, and I've written a few books myself, but you interviewed 200 people. Now, that's quite a few. What surprised you most based upon those interviews?
You know, I have to say that I came away more sympathetic to a lot of different people than I was expecting. I think my mind shifted on who the real bad actors were and who weren't. I saw a system where so many people who wanted to do good and wanted to speak out were prevented from doing so, like therapists today. We have conversion therapy bans in 19 states that prohibit a therapist from doing anything but agreeing with a patient, even a minor patient who comes and says, "I think I'm really a boy." If the therapist doesn't immediately agree, they could be subject to losing their license. So I think I was surprised at that. And I was also surprised by the number of transgender adults I spoke to who were completely alarmed by this sudden epidemic among teenage girls. They do not believe these are actually kids who would naturally be, transgender. They've talked themselves into it, and they're really alarmed by how easily they're obtaining hormones and surgeries.
So bottom line, who really suffers here from this effort to basically silence people talking about this?
Well, the young girls suffer the most. These girls are going through, major, either getting hormone therapy and breast removal for so easily without so much as a therapist note. They walk into Planned Parenthood, and the same day they walk out with a course of testosterone that's a Schedule III controlled substance. They do not need a therapist note for, and they're being harmed in all kinds of states. Remember, the age of medical consent varies by state. So in Oregon, it is 15. You can be 15 years old and without parental permission, walk out the door with a course of testosterone that day.
Now, this is a polarizing issue for corporate America, at least, because Amazon banned the ads for your book. But is it polarizing among those you talk to?
It actually isn't. That's the crazy thing. Most of the parents who call me are political progressives. They are longtime LGBTQ supporters. Parents are unified, actually, in this across the board. I talk to all kinds of parents: religious, secular, conservative, progressive, although most of them are politically progressive. I talk to all kinds of parents. The problem is we now have activists essentially posing as doctors. I mean, they are ostensibly doctors, but all they're doing is rubber stamping this. We have scientists who are rubber stamping terrible research based on really poor quality of evidence. And we have teachers that have been so indoctrinated by activists that they are marching into the classrooms and sowing terrible gender confusion among the student populations.
So Abigail, what is behind, though, this intense effort to silence any conversation about this so that there can be no dissenting views.
Right. So basically, a bunch of biological male activists, transgender activists. And I always say that when I am interviewed, I've talked to many lovely, wonderful transgender people who do not support this and they do not behave that way. They are wonderful people. But the activists are they are the most extreme members of any group, and they are quite energized and extreme in this case. And they object to us having even a conversation about the mental health and welfare of teenage girls. And unfortunately, they're succeeding. They're shutting it down.
Did that surprise you to find that that was actually taking place? That, as people have been kind of sounding the alarm about this, that in fact it is real?
So the silencing, what surprised me was the extent of it. People don't realize how thoroughly our institutions have been corrupted. I had editors and writers at the top publications in America read my book. I sent them my book and say, wow, this is really interesting. I want to write a review. And they would request a review copy. And then they would write me back saying they were writing a review. And then they were told absolutely not by their publications. In many cases, they were told, that it would cost them their job if they tried to proceed with this. I don't think Americans are aware of just how thoroughly young woke activists have corrupted all of our institutions.
I want to go back for our final question here, Abigail. We talked about who was actually suffering, who hurt from this. It was the young girls that are being led through this, and in many cases, their bodies altered and they can't change. They're locked into this. What are the signs that parents need to be looking for?
Number one, social media immersion. The number of harmful trans influencers or adults who will reach out to your children online, encourage them in this gender ideology, tell them that testosterone makes them feel great. These are often kids, a little bit older. They're in their 20s. They're very cool. They have well-produced videos. And young teens are unfortunately indoctrinating in an endless loop of these very highly produced and very watchable videos and convincing themselves if they don't feel perfectly feminine that they're probably a boy. A second thing to look for is gender ideology in the schools. I don't think parents are aware of just how thoroughly activists have infiltrated the educational system. They're providing the curricula. The schools are not being honest with parents. There'll often be a form. Many public schools, there's a form that they sign in which they promise to keep the child's gender, the new child's name and pronouns hidden from the parents. This is school policy in California, New York, and elsewhere, so that the parents can go a year without even knowing that their child is being referred to as a boy and by a boy's name at school. And it will win the child a lot of popularity they may be looking for. So that's something to look for and to oppose. And the third thing is, look, there's a lot of anxiety and depression out there among our teenage girls. They're really suffering. And unfortunately, they're being sold a lie that if they really just transition to male, all their troubles will go away.
Abigail, powerful information, troubling, but powerful, and obviously a call to action on behalf of parents and all of us to help protect these young girls. Abigail, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me on.
And folks, I want to encourage you to heed that warning, especially parents. Be involved in what your kids are seeing, what they're hearing, who they're listening to. And of course, as we look at the overall agenda and those seeking to silence those who would raise objections to this, we need to be praying, we need to be voting, and we need to be standing for these truths. So take the challenge to pray, vote, and stand.